Hey guys, tonight we're peeling back the makeup and probably a few layers of skin to discover why Tudor women did unspeakable things with lead, all in the name of beauty. You think contouring is a lot? Try smearing toxic sludge on your face before selfies were invented. Just so Sir Thomas over there might compliment your ethereal complexion. Before we start, please consider liking and subscribing, but only if you actually enjoy this, and drop a comment about your own questionable beauty routines. Maybe you once tried an at-home face mask that smelled like wet dog. I want to know. Now, dim the lights, crank up that box fan until it sounds like medieval wind through a leaky window, and get comfortable. I want you to really picture this. Have you ever wondered what it felt like to strive for beauty when dermatology consisted of leeches and prayer? Just how desperate would you have to be to smear literal poison on your face? What does a Tudor spa day look like? And seriously, why did nobody warn anyone about eyebrows falling off mid-banquet? Could you survive an era where makeup remover was hope and the ideal skin tone was clinical ghost? Well, congratulations. You've just woken up in 1540s England. There's lead in your lotion, your corset might be plotting against you, and your radiant glow comes with mild hallucinations. Good luck. It's sunrise, and you roll off a feather-stuffed mattress that's seen more generations than your local sandwich shop. Your first sight? Yourself, reflected in a chunk of polished metal, so wonky you look like you're auditioning for a funhouse. The day begins by admiring your skin's innate ability to look healthy, which back then means approximately 2 shades paler than actual paper. Welcome to your Tudor morning routine, where mirrors are more medieval myth than staple home accessory. Glass mirrors. Those are the stuff of Venetian wizardry, better suited to highborn aristocrats and daydreams. For you, it's a slapped-together disc of brass, maybe tin, hammered and polished by someone who very likely had questionable eyesight and even fewer standards. If you're posh, lucky you. There's a silvered hand mirror tucked onto your veneered dressing table. Otherwise, it's metal all the way, your own private portal to the distorted funhouse version of you. But don't worry, Tudor you isn't expecting perfection. In fact, you haven't even invented the concept of Instagram ready. Sure, you use the mirror, but only for the essentials, like making sure your ruff is ruffly enough, or that the mole on your cheek is painted on dead center. The morning's soft light catches on the irregularities in both your skin and the poorly buffed surface, and for a moment, you wonder if this is what royalty feels like. Blurred, mysterious, and oddly compelling. That shiny hunk of metal in your hands is a luxury item, even if it looks like it was rescued from the smithy's reject pile. Most folks are using water as their main looking glass, pond, bucket, or puddle, whichever's closest and least likely to result in a tragic backstory later. Your mirror isn't for staring, but for glancing, almost apologetically, to check that your cap is straight and narrow and that this is indeed, mostly, your face. And what a face it is, at least by Tudor standards. Pallor is in. A golden tan means peasant who works outdoors. You want that smooth, unblemished complexion, all the better to hint at your status. Or at least at the fact you didn't work in the fields yesterday. Your reflection, such as it is, tells the story. A dab of herbal concoction here, a smear of fragrant pomade there, all done with one nervous eye on the wonky, glinting surface. Let's not get sentimental about pre-electric beauty. Your mirror experience is less checking my angles and more, am I still all here? Still, in a world ruled by candlelight, a sliver of daylight and a piece of burnished metal is the height of luxury. You give yourself a final appraisal, summon your best, I woke up like this expression, and prepare to face a society where status is measured in degrees of pearliness and the sheen of your hair oil. For the rest of your family, ma, da, siblings, grumpy gran, this miraculous orb is strictly rationed. There's a dance of elbows and sharp retorts. Let me see. You've checked 3 times already. You still look like yourself. Unlucky. And, should a rare visitor come calling, out comes the mirror. Proof, perhaps, that your household is definitely on the up and up, or at least can fake it convincingly in polished metal. This sliver of a morning ritual, wobbling reflection and all, sets the tone for your Tudor day. Resourceful, mildly competitive, and above all, ready to face the world. One squinting, not quite sure. It's you glance at a time. Forget flawless. Here, just recognizing yourself counts as a win. Now tie that ruff proper, smooth your hair, and stride forth, the distorted confidence of funhouse royalty shining off every bumpy inch of your mirror. Time to assemble your glam squad. Egg whites, vinegar, crushed pearls if you're rich, or a paste of lead and vinegar if you fancy extra drama. You mix it beside your window, blissfully ignorant of any product warnings, and slather it on with fingers crossed for radiant and not recently deceased. Step 1 for the perfect pale face. A foundation known as Venetian ceruse, which sounds luxurious until you realize it's basically led with a PR team. The beauty standard of the era, inspired by Queen Elizabeth I herself, was to look as pale and untouchable as a marble statue, preferably without the cracking. Ceruse was the holy grail. Smooth, powdery and bright white. It transformed your skin into something closer to plaster than flesh. Application was anything but subtle. Forget blending. This was about making a statement. Extra points if neighbours remark that you look like you've never seen the sun or a vegetable. But your efforts won't stop at base makeup. Next, it's time for a delicate flush. Applied so carefully, it's basically a performance. Rouge was crafted from everything from crushed cochineal bugs to madder root, mixed with a little animal fat or egg white for staying power. If you were fashionable and bold, a dab of this vivid red or pink was dotted high on the cheeks, setting off those moon-pale faces. For lips, a similar concoction would be painted on, with a final gloss of beeswax for anyone who fancied a bit of luxury. Then there's the brow department. Eyebrows were expected to be high, arched, and very sparse. In fact, if your natural brows didn't quite fit that bill, the solution was simple. Pluck, pluck, and pluck some more until you looked permanently surprised. The really dedicated even shaved their natural brows and drew on thin replacements with soot or burnt clove, hoping no sudden rainstorm would leave their efforts running down their face. It's beauty at high stakes. Eye makeup, to modern eyes, would seem almost subtle, but not for lack of trying. Dark coal for dramatic effect was borrowed from older traditions or made by burning almonds. Plenty of resourcefulness went into highlighting those peepers, especially for a masked ball or court event. For those obsessed with shimmer, and who isn't, ground mother of pearl or mica might be lightly dusted over the eyelids. At least, if your family fortune could handle sparing a little pearl powder for your latest party look. But it wasn't just about colour. The final step, a dusting of scented rice powder or finely ground starch, intended not only to set your look, but to counteract any, let's say, damp issues. Tudor hygiene not being the stuff of legend. Add in a waft of floral or herbal concoction as your finishing touch, and you're ready for the court, the street, or, quite likely, for the neighbour to ask, "Are you feeling all right?" Of course, no one in Tudor England was scrolling WebMD to check the side effects of daily lead exposure. The dangers of these products, ranging from skin ulcers to hair loss, and, eventually, outright poisoning, were entirely unknown, and the rumour that beauty is pain was a little more literal here. Yet, these rituals were the height of fashion, transforming a regular Tudor into a canvas of class, wealth, and unintended risk. Peel away the vintage glamour and you'll find a fascinating mix of desperation, creativity, and admiration for royalty at the root of these routines. Whether it was inventiveness or a collective leap of faith in the name of beauty, Tudor makeup remains one of history's bolder chapters in the search for radiance. If nothing else, it makes us appreciate our labelled bottles and allergy tests a little more. Let me know if you'd like adjustments, or if you want citations, quotes, pulled from your transcripts for authenticity. Why do you want to look like this? Because Queen Elizabeth said so. Vitality and good health, Tudor style, means skin so pale you look like you've never seen a vegetable. You try to radiate upper class, but mostly radiate lead fumes. Let's call it humble brag anemia. In the world of Tudor fashion, a ghostly, near-transparent complexion wasn't just a pretty look. It was your resume, your social status, and your Instagram filter, all rolled into one. Royals and wannabe royals alike laboriously painted their faces white, desperate to broadcast that they were not, under any circumstances, a peasant. Why? Because peasants were healthy in the least fashionable way. They had sun-browned skin, visible muscle tone, and, horrors, actual vitamin D. In Tudor logic, the best way to say, "I am wealthy," was to look as if you'd spent your entire life avoiding tasks, nutrition, and possibly the outdoors altogether. Let's talk technique. Achieving this so-called perfection wasn't a matter of skipping the beach. No, Tudor trendsetters needed Venetian ceruse, a face paint so potent it doubled as an industrial hazard. Picture this. Your morning routine involves slathering your skin with a thick paste made from white lead and vinegar. The lead gives you that sickly, aristocratic gleam. The vinegar helps dissolve your skin cells, just in case you needed an exfoliant, with results you could really feel. The more lead, the higher the status, or so everyone hoped. Queen Elizabeth herself was rumoured to slather on the white stuff by the handful. The result is immortalised in portraits, that chalky, almost luminescent skin, with veins and all hints of human warmth erased. Bonus points for a bluish tinge. The colour of the truly fashionable corpse. Unsurprisingly, this look came with side effects. Lead is, as you might guess, catastrophic for the human body. Adherents of the trend endured skin lesions, hair loss, and rotting teeth as part of the price of beauty. But rather than blame the makeup, most doubled down. If blemishes or sores appeared, they covered them with even more ceruse, or with little felt patches shaped like moons or stars. Cute for a costume party, less so at your cousin's funeral. This was high maintenance, high fashion. Your face might be slowly falling off, but at least you looked expensively tragic. The ideal extended beyond just foundation. Rosy cheeks and lips were painted on, usually with a rouge made of cochineal or vermilion, mercury laced, in case lead wasn't hazardous enough. Meanwhile, eyebrows were plucked nearly out of existence and hairlines were artificially raised, sometimes by burning off the front locks. The effect? An otherworldly, almost alien face. Vast forehead, pinched brows, glazed skin. Step aside. E.T. The Tudor elite did unnatural beauty first. It's not just vanity, it's politics. Elizabethan rulers weaponized the complexion trend to reinforce class boundaries. By defining beauty as something requiring both money, for imported pigments, and time, to avoid the sun, they made sure beauty was constantly out of reach for the working classes. Social mobility. Only, if you could survive slow motion poisoning. And if you think this all sounds like a fever dream of Gwyneth Paltrow's alchemy phase, remember, suffering for beauty is a tale as old as time. The next time you dab on foundation to hide a blemish, maybe tip your brush to Queen Liz and her ghostly, lead-powdered legacy. Tudor glam was proof that looking like death warmed over could be the ultimate status symbol, as long as you didn't actually die first. You shuffle off to the apothecary, a store that sells roughly 40% medicine and 60% future regrets. You browse shelves of powdered roots, dried bugs, and a suspicious white paste labelled Venetian ceruse, which costs more than your annual rent. The customer experience here is definitely self-serve meets Russian roulette. The air is thick with the scent of decaying herbs, dried animal bits, and the faint tang of desperation. You do your best to look nonchalant. After all, you're just a humble patron shopping for, say, a headache remedy, and not, for instance, arsenic, which, conveniently, is available in a small blue vial behind the counter, right next to the leeches, and slightly behind the jars of pickled eyeballs. "Good morning," calls the apothecary, a man who appears to have replaced soap with a different kind of tincture. "Can I interest you in a remedy for heartbreak? Or just the usual rat poison?" His smile is all gums and no sincerity. You ask, a bit too casually, about the uses of mercury, something you heard about from a cousin's friend who now walks sideways. You're soon swept into a world where every ingredient has a double life. Foxglove, technically a heart medication, but also what you'd slip into your enemy's tea if you wanted them gone by the next full moon. Belladonna, lovely name, even lovelier if you want someone to experience vivid hallucinations or a quick fatal swoon. Even the apothecary's own handwriting seems to hint at danger. Ingredients are written in Latin, just in case you aren't sure if atropa belladonna kills headaches or just people. You make your purchase, trying to look as innocent as possible. The apothecary wraps your herbal remedies in brown paper. "For your grandmother?" he asks, a note of mirth in his voice. "Of course," you reply. Grandmothers in this town apparently have the most interesting shopping lists. Navigating the apothecary's wares is a masterclass in plausible deniability. "Need arsenic? Buy some rat poison. Everyone has rats. Want laudanum? Tell him you have a terrible cough. Opium? A bad back." These thinly veiled euphemisms are the lingua franca here. A knowing glance is exchanged. Money passes hands. And you both pretend that these are all perfectly ordinary household supplies. Then there's the issue of getting home unseen. You clutch the parcel with just the right mix of paranoia and purpose. You are positive that every fluttering curtain in town hides a pair of judging eyes, ready to whisper your secrets for a copper coin. If only the apothecary offered a subtlety discount, you'd pay double. For those unwilling or unable to brave the suspicious stares of shopkeepers, there's always the outdoor market. There, sketchy salesmen hawk powders and filters with a carnival barker's zeal. "Guaranteed to cure what ails you," they cry, not specifying that what ails you could include a rival, a husband with inconvenient longevity, or you, if you're foolish enough to actually drink it yourself. Of course, not every shopping trip ends successfully. Some poisons move through whispers and intermediaries. Maybe you commission an acquaintance, someone with a reputation for getting things done. The sort of friend who knows who to talk to, what palms to grease, and how to say, "I need something for the garden slugs," with a straight face. At the end of it all, you return home. A little poorer, a lot more anxious, and with a tidy paper bundle clutched under your coat. Tonight Perhaps someone at dinner won't notice the new flavor in their wine, or the way you watch every sip with the careful gaze of a budding alchemist. Shopping complete, you congratulate yourself. In a town full of secrets and suspicious apothecaries, you have everything you need. And if the contents of your shopping bag ever come under scrutiny, well, you were just taking care of grandma. Of course. Title: Daily makeup application is a journey. You lay out your tools, maybe a small knife for scraping, perhaps a bit of velvet for buffing, and create a look that says, ready for afternoon beheading, casual or formal. The ritual rarely begins with a clean canvas. No, that's for much later centuries with their micellar waters and their microwave-friendly cleansers. Here, we work with what last night's candle soot left behind and whatever traces of rouge survived the sleepless, moth-nibbled hours. You dab cool water on a rag, rainwater if you're lucky, or perhaps the runoff from the apothecary's leaking roof. Pat, not rub. After all, we want to look invitingly wan, not freshly flayed. Selecting pigments is a sacred act. The lead-white jar, chipped dangerously at the rim, is the keystone. You scoop and smear, feeling a gentle burning tingle. That's how you know it's working, eating gently into both skin and social anxiety. The heat mingles nicely with the brisk breeze sneaking through unglazed windows. Next comes a softened stick of coal, surely imported through at least 3 embargoed territories. Trace it along the lash line, not too neatly. You want people to wonder, do you sleep in your makeup, or do you never sleep at all? Blush, or more correctly, fever flush. Pick a ribbon of carmine, harvested, perhaps, from the cochineal beetles imported by your cousin's dubious trade contacts. Swirl high on the cheekbones. Yes, more. Yes, even more. The goal isn't subtlety. It's to broadcast, I have either just escaped an affair or a mild bout of consumption. Blend with the side of your index finger, which you may wipe on your underskirt if no damp cloth is handy. Do not forget the brows. Tools for this delicate operation might include a heated pin, a soot-dipped toothpick, or your roommate's forgotten sword hilt, just enough to darken and arch hauntingly. Keep them uneven, a warning to observers. Approach with caution, for I possess both personality and access to small blades. Lips are painted last, to avoid smearing while muttering invocations or cursing uncooperative hairpins. For colour, press a bit of dampened brick dust or rouge paste. Recipe: 2 parts hope, 1 part whatever crushed berry remains. Onto the lips. There is a real art to getting just enough colour to suggest vitality without crossing into village strumpet. If you do, lean in. Village strumpets, as history will later prove, often survive to remarry well. A dusting of starch, rice powder, or finely ground bones seals the entire illusion. Stand in the drift, breathe it in, contemplate life's fleeting nature. As the powder settles, so do your social plans for the day. Perhaps an accidental run-in at the market. Perhaps a fleeting glimpse of your rival at court. Both of you squinting through clouds of personal improvement. This daily practice is not mere artistry. It's a talisman, each stroke a rebuttal to chaos, every layer a silent plea to fate for a more favourable decree. You finish by running your hands over the tools once more, wiping, hiding, tucking them away for tomorrow when the world will again ask, are you ready? Will you be remembered for your lips, your wits, or the exquisite, otherworldly pallor you achieved with nothing but recklessness and a bit of ground bone? And so, the ritual ends until dusk, when you will repeat, retouch, remove, and begin again, always in pursuit of that perfect, devastating impression. Whether for a lover, a judge, or the history books, Let me know if you'd like adjustments or need the style tweaked for another segment. You dab extra lead paste on a suspicious blemish. The blemish surrenders. Your pores, however, mysteriously develop a grudge and may never forgive you, sprouting new imperfections by tomorrow. Spot treating is the ceremonial hobby of anyone who has spent more than a fleeting second with a mirror and a sense that their face is a battleground. The logic seems unassailable. Isolate the enemy, deploy a targeted attack, emerge victorious. Your skin, the glowing field of triumph. But anyone who has actually attempted this tactical maneuver knows the drill. In the pursuit of absolute flawlessness, the best you can often achieve is a brief armistice. You start with optimism and a cocktail of treatments, salicylic acid, benzoyl peroxide, some mystical herbal concoction recommended by a cousin, or even that time-honored favorite, an old-fashioned toothpaste dab. Each product comes carefully branded and rife with whispered promises. Zap your zits. Erase imperfection overnight. Under harsh vanity lights, even the most skeptical can be seduced by the hope that this time the spot won't just fade, but the whole cycle will break. Like a high-stakes game, you wager your hope and a little dignity each night. The ritual is familiar. Cleanse vigorously, maybe too vigorously. Lean in close, scrutinize the outlines of every pimple, then zero in on the culprit of the week. It feels scientific, forensic. You want to believe that this tiny, precise dot of medication holds the key to everything. If you can just outsmart your skin's unpredictable chemistry for a single evening. For a few hours, you hold on to this fantasy. Morning light, however, is a harsh judge. Sometimes the blemish lies defeated, a scabby speck of your former worry. Other mornings it's grown new heads, as if emboldened by your offense. Worse, the surrounding skin, irritated and affronted, rebels. Red rings form. Dryness crackles. Sometimes, in the cold arithmetic of spot treating, you lose more than you gain. You neutralize one zit, only to cultivate two others. Proof that your skin, like a badly run corporation, always finds ways to redistribute chaos. Then comes the psychological fallout, a relentless round of internal negotiation. Did you use too much? Probably. Did you spread the medicine far enough? Doubtful. Should you have tried hydrocolloid patches or kept a traditional drying lotion? Like a chess player haunted by hypothetical moves, you mentally replay your choices and tweak your plan for tonight. Meanwhile, blemishes, having no respect for your plans, continue to pop up at seemingly choreographed but arbitrary intervals. And let's not forget the hazards of over-treating, the impulse to stamp out any would-be pimple before it has a chance to rise. This eventually leads to patches of rawness, flakiness, or that special dilemma of needing spot concealer to cover both the blemish and the treatment zone. You are caught in a loop. Treat, react, repair, repeat. But the narrative of spot treating also contains, strangely, a little catharsis. There is comfort in the illusion of control. Dabbing medication on your face at night is like a whispered promise to yourself. Tomorrow, you'll be better. Tomorrow, you'll be clear. Even if that promise is sometimes a fiction, it carries you. There is pride. There is ritual in the effort. And for every setback, hello new zit, there is occasionally a minor victory. Sometimes the blemish really does vanish. You win until the next one. So, spot treating may not be the miracle it's marketed as. But in the nightly battle for clear skin, that tiny dot of cream or gel becomes a kind of flag. One planted for hope, if not for outright victory. And with this ritual, imperfect as it is, we move forward, one blemish, and sometimes two, at a time. Tudor eyebrows, were intentionally plucked into extinction, which is both a fashion statement and a low-key survival strategy for the lice. You stare at your mirror, tracing what used to be your brows. Grateful modern trends haven't circled back to this one yet. The Tudor court wielded its tweezers with the same ruthlessness as it did its political machinations. The official brow mandate, gone. Entire foreheads were scrubbed clean until they gleamed like alabaster tablets, awaiting the next bold royal decree, or, more likely, the next round of forehead sweat from wearing those elaborate headdresses. Eyebrows, in the age of Henry VIII, weren't neglected, as much as exiled. The absence of hair above the eyes became the presence of power. The less brow, the more you signalled your access to time, servants, and the ability to endure what must have been a lifetime of chilly breezes on your freshly exposed skin. It wasn't a sad accident. Hair removal was a conscious art, employing everything from tweezers to concoctions made of quicklime. Yes, that quicklime. Burning included, no extra charge. Those desperate to please the courtly ideal suffered not just the loss of their brows, but often their skin, their dignity, and occasionally their sanity. It was a small price to pay for the appearance of eternal youth and pliability in a court forever haunted by the threat of royal disappointment. At court, the bare forehead wasn't just in, it was the it accessory. Servants might have been tasked with plucking stray hairs at the break of dawn, so their lady could emerge for breakfast looking as blank as a canvas. It's rumoured that even the king's favourites devoted scandalous hours to the careful banishment of brow. Yet the irony, these absent brows commanded respect. To be browless in this context wasn't to be overlooked. It was to be noticed for your fashion-forward vision, your courtly discipline, your willingness to risk third-degree burns in the pursuit of beauty. All of this brings up a peculiar kind of nostalgia when viewed from today's brow-loving culture, where full and fluffy reigns supreme. Modern beauty influencers meticulously carve arches with microblades and pomades, producing a look that would have left Anne Boleyn scandalized. Imagine showing up to a Tudor banquet with a laminated brow. The only thing getting you beheaded would be your rebellious facial hair. But every beauty rule, no matter how strange, telegraphs the anxieties and aspirations of its era. The Tudor brow blackout, in its odd severity, was a means of aligning with the Queen, Elizabeth I herself, the ultimate brow abolitionist. Her stark face framed by that unmistakable copper halo was iconic, impossible to imitate fully, but dangerous not to attempt. In the hierarchy of appearance, absent brows became the calling card of feminine virtue, courtly favour, and a certain stoic willingness to suffer in silence. Don't let the absence fool you. The browless look prevailed precisely because it was so difficult, and borderline masochistic, to achieve. Sitting at your vanity, you might try to picture yourself at court, weighed down by velvet and pearls, gamely enduring each pluck. There's comfort, maybe pride, in knowing you'll never have to go to such lengths just to signal your loyalty, that your brows, unruly or otherwise, can remain right where evolution intended. So the next time you find yourself cursing a stray brow hair, channel your inner Tudor. Remember those whose greatest power lay in their absence. If brow respect was ever earned, it was during an era that defined beauty with the boldness to erase it altogether. And in some sly way, perhaps this ancient sacrifice paved the way for today's freedom to choose how much, or how little, you want to show the world. You want a hint of colour, so you reach for cochineal, powered bug extract, really, or maybe a faint red stain made from crushed plant roots. The taste is earthy, and the look is, I contributed to the economy of somewhere very far away. But wait, let's pause and appreciate what's really happening here. In your hand, you hold not just a cosmetic, but a centuries-old pact between vanity and ingenuity. People have been smashing things, beetles, berries, bark, onto their lips since, well, lips were invented. This is not modern decadence. It's ancient resourcefulness, with just a dash of show-off. Cleopatra did it with crushed carmine insects. Aztecs did it with achiote seeds. So when that faint colour stains your mouth, you're not just applying makeup. You're inheriting a global relay race of pigment, from palace courtiers to Peruvian farmers, to whoever stocks the natural shelf at your local co-op. Let's be clear, lip colour is less about romance and more about survival in the jungle of social cues. A little tint says, I am awake. I have not been lost in the mountains for 3 weeks. I am someone whose lips are alarmingly robust, able to signal health, competence, and possibly the willingness to deal with the early morning video calls. Forget signalling to prospective mates. This is about looking alive in a world that blurs at the edges. But the absurdity creeps in. What other product brags, literally on the package, about being made from bugs? Modern marketing dances between pretending it's all natural and hiding the truth in 6-point font. Cochineal extract sounds vaguely glamorous, almost French, until you find out it's basically sun-dried beetle powder. And yet, plenty of you reach for it every morning. Why? Because the alternative is zombie, or unpaid intern, or I forgot what sunlight is. Pause for a taste test. You swipe that faint crimson on, fully aware you've tricked yourself into caring about a feature that is, by nature, rarely seen outside of eating or shouting. For a moment, you become someone else. Just a touch. A little more flushed, a little more polished, a little more awake. Maybe you close your eyes and imagine the jungles of South America, the relentless handpicking of tiny bugs off cactus pads, the transformation from crawling insect to power pigment. Maybe not. Maybe you just wanted to hide the coffee stain from the morning Zoom call. There's a secret power here. Lip colour, in its simplest form, is an act of confidence theft. Don't feel radiant? Smear on something vaguely berryish. Don't want questions about your health. A little rosiness is a silent, yes, I sleep. And if someone asks about the exotic tint, you get a story. It's made from insects, you whisper confidingly, enjoying their discomfort. Let them Google it. Let them learn. Of course, we live in an age of choice fatigue. 30 kinds of red, 60 shades of berry, 10 brands claiming sustainable harvest. The ritual becomes less about standing out and more about controlling the chaos, choosing a tribe, maybe even connecting with the generations of people who came before you, tinting their lips before stepping into the sun. So give lip service to the ritual. Add a bit of colour, knowing full well it comes at the intersection of biology, trade, and global weirdness. And wear it with a little smugness, if you like. For a few brief hours, you wield the power of 1,000 crushed bugs, and perhaps the confidence of Cleopatra herself. Why bathe regularly when you can dab yourself with perfume and powdered herbs stored in your bodice? Today's choice, rosemary over last week's onions, it almost works until you step outside. The struggle to stay fresh-smelling in a world with scarce water and even scarcer privacy led to some truly creative solutions. Step back a few centuries, and you'll find a bustling trade in aromatic concoctions and little bags of dried lavender or rose petals sewn into clothing, hidden in pockets or tucked into bonnets. Imagine corsets not just cinching your waist, but infused with secret stashes of marjoram and thyme, a portable garden designed to duel with the ever-present funk of unwashed humanity. But why the elaborate scent cover-ups? Let's be clear, it wasn't because people didn't know that water could clean you. The problem was that bathing, especially in public baths, became associated with vice and disease in many parts of early modern Europe. Fear of contagion, sometimes justified, sometimes not, meant full immersion baths slipped out of fashion. Suddenly, wearable deodorizing strategies became a necessity, not just a luxury. That's where perfumers thrived. The streets of Paris, London, or Florence were filled with scent merchants hawking colognes and solid perfumes pressed into fancy compacts. Many people kept a pomander, a small, often ornate ball, holding musky resins and herbs dangling from their belts or chains. Just imagine every waistline jangling with anti-stench ammunition. And if you were wealthy enough, you might own an entire assortment. Jasmine for your gloves, violet for your handkerchief, bergamot for your hair powder. Smell became a status symbol as well as a tool for basic survival. But not everyone had access to imported spices or precious oils. For most, the daily arsenal included options like dried rosemary or mint stuffed in handkerchiefs, a quick rub with citrus peel if you were lucky enough to have one, or, less successfully, a generous dusting of starch or talc to soak up odours. In a pinch, you might even find yourself repurposing yesterday's bread as a kind of makeshift body scrub. Scent layering, Middle Ages style, was less about seduction and more about not offending your neighbours in the market queue. There was also a social side to scent. Sharing a favourite concoction was a gesture of friendship or flirtation. Recipes for homebrewed fragrances, rosewater, orange blossom distillate, bay laurel oil, were often passed down between generations and scribbled in the margins of battered family recipe books. Behind every waft of lavender or pungent sprig of pennyroyal, there's a story, the hope of catching someone's eye, or at least not making them flinch as you pass. Of course, there were limits to what sweet herbs and pomanders could do. Step into any crowded tavern or cattle fair, and the carefully masked scent of rosemary quickly surrendered to the heavier notes of smoke, sweat, and the indefinable aroma of too many people in too little space. And let's be honest, a dash of cinnamon on your bodice can't compete when someone nearby hasn't washed their only set of linens since the last solstice. Eventually, advances in plumbing, public health initiatives, and changing attitudes toward cleanliness made regular bathing possible, and, finally, expected. But even then, the tradition of scented cover-ups lingered. Perfume outlasted the need to mask bad odours, evolving into an expression of individuality and sensory pleasure. So next time you spritz a bit of perfume before heading out, give a nod to those who relied on fragrant pouches, dried herbs, and a defiant faith in the power of rosemary. For them, staying fresh wasn't just about hygiene, it was about ingenuity, resourcefulness, and a dash of social grace in an often smelly world. Every glance in public measures your worth by how ghostly you appear. Neighbours compare how close they are to freshly laundered bedsheet. Rosy cheeks mean you're probably a servant, or worse, healthy. You practice your sickly stare in the mirror. Fashion, in the age of pallor, isn't a matter of taste. It's a matter of survival. One misstep, one accidental brush with fresh air, or God forbid sunlight, and you risk appearing robust. Robustness is for labourers, those unfortunates who toil outdoors. You spend afternoons behind drawn curtains, composing yourself in candlelight and lamenting the minor tragedy of window glass that doesn't adequately filter the sun. There are endless debates in drawing rooms about the proper shade of pallor. Porcelain, alabaster, or the ever-aspirational death in February. Anyone approaching eggshell risks being mistaken for nouveau riche, someone whose fortune is too new to allow for chronic vitamin D deficiency. And so, society invents remedies for the curse of natural colouring. Lead powders, chalky creams, a dab of arsenic. Pain is beauty, but pallor is status. Every mirror becomes a site of anxious recalibration. Have you achieved the translucent fatigue that whispers, "I own land, not lung capacity"? Mothers discipline children who show up from the garden with colour in their faces, clips on admonishingly hat brims, and whispers that Aunt Maud lost her inheritance after she was caught with a tan on holiday. Etiquette guides offer helpful tips. Never speak too energetically, as conversation that sounds lively might indicate you have too much blood in your veins. The pressure doesn't stop with the upper crust. Tradespeople copy you, desperate for a step up the social ladder, applying flour to their faces, even if the result is less milky radiance and more lumpy pancake. In the public square, anonymity is threatened by the unfairly sun-touched. Children snicker as they pass by, chanting, "Pale as the moon, rich as a duke." Meanwhile, the unlucky are sent to the countryside in hopes that malnutrition will finally deliver the desired paleness. Even literature conspires in this effort. Heroines are described not as glowing, but as wan, gaunt, ethereal, as if barely tethered to the earth by their own frail frames. Parties and salons become competitions for the most ghostly guest. You perfect the art of drifting, barely touching the ground, moving with languid indifference. Someone who moves with purpose, who shows any trace of vitality, is quickly passed over for someone who embodies mist, a presence defined primarily by its absence. There are rumours that Lady Fairlie's uncanny pallor is the work of a new imported cream, secretly laced, it is believed, with ground pearl and melancholy. But there is danger close behind the trend. Doctors warn of collapsing corset wearers who have not seen the sun in months. Most ignore them. Even a brief walk in the park under a parasol is a potential reputational hazard. Poetry, suitably faded, laments the crush of social expectations and the way a healthy complexion has become a thing of ridicule. If you comment on the absurdity, people will whisper that you're merely jealous, that your cheeks could never pass the bedsheet test. So you remain devoted, measuring your worth in shades lighter than snow, steadfast in pursuit of respectability. And as you step into the parlour each day, you feel the unrelenting pressure. 1,000 silent eyes tracking the faintest flush on your skin. A reminder that, in this society, the ultimate testimony to your status is not what you say or do, but how barely present you seem. A will-o'-the-wisp drifting through the expectations of your peers. To endure is to fade gracefully. You feel a mild headache and an odd tingle on your cheek. Your friends say, "Beauty is pain." You wonder if it should be this much pain. The phrase toxic relationship suddenly makes sense. Side effects. The part of the journey with skincare that everyone warns you about, but few know how to describe until it happens to them. For some, it's a fleeting flush that fades as fast as it appears. For others, it's a constellation of bumps, redness, or the stubborn itchiness that persists no matter how many times you splash cool water on your face. When it happens, it doesn't feel clinical, or scientific, or even logical. It feels personal. You start to question everything. Was it the serum, the sunscreen, the new cleanser with a name you can't pronounce? Or was it, as your grandmother warned, that you touched your face too much? The first rule is to pause. Don't panic scroll through social media or start a frantic late-night search for horror stories on beauty forums. Your body is communicating with you, sometimes in whispers, sometimes in shouts. It could be a normal adjustment or a red flag. But before you try to fix it, You need to notice it. Give yourself a moment. Step away from the mirror and just breathe. Sometimes perspective is the real antidote. There are side effects that signal progress. A bit of dryness when you introduce a retinoid, a brief spell of purging with acids or vitamin C. These are rites of passage on the road to brighter skin. But there's a difference between a little discomfort and a warning sign. The difference is in the duration, the intensity, and the way it makes you feel. Is your skin adapting, or is it rebelling? For the minor annoyances, those tiny tingles or dry patches, think of them as your skin's way of saying, hey, slow down. Less is more. You can dilute your active ingredients, apply them less frequently, or layer with nourishing, soothing products. Look for fragrance-free moisturizers or hydrating masks. Creams with ceramides or panthenol are your allies now. If you're using actives, try the sandwich technique. A thin layer of moisturizer, followed by your actives, and then another veil of moisturizer to buffer your skin. But sometimes, your body sounds the alert. Redness that spreads like wildfire, stinging that brings tears to your eyes, or swelling that won't subside. That's when you put everything down. Strip back your routine to the basics, a gentle cleanser and a plain, soothing moisturizer. No actives, no experiments. If needed, pop a cold compress in the fridge and treat your face with the same care you'd give to a sunburn or scraped knee. Don't hesitate to call in reinforcements. Dermatologists exist for a reason. If your symptoms are getting worse or you're experiencing swelling, blistering, or pain, reach out. A quick selfie, an appointment, and a professional's eye can make all the difference. Not just for your skin, but for your peace of mind. Here's the part rarely shown in those glossy before and after Instagram reels, the waiting. Skin heals in days, not hours. Sometimes the hardest thing is to do nothing, but patience is medicine. Celebrate the small improvements, the reduction in redness, the softening of that patch of dryness, the return of your skin's normal bounce. Remember, this isn't punishment. It's data. Every tingle, flush, or flake is your skin's way of letting you know its limits and its resilience. Like any relationship, it's a two-way street. You give, your skin responds, and together you learn what works and what doesn't. In the end, side effects aren't just a detour. They're a pivotal part of your skincare story. It's not about chasing perfection. It's about listening, learning, and above all, respecting the skin you're in. Shampoo is years and years away. You reach for a powder made from starch and herbs to soak up the shine. Now you smell faintly of pastries and regret. Back in the 17th and 18th centuries, the idea of a squeaky clean scalp hadn't quite made its debut. Hair, especially for those who could afford a mirror, was a statement of status, artistry, and, let's be honest, perseverance. But the absence of modern shampoos posed a daily struggle. Hair grew greasy, dusty, and occasionally acquired lives of its own. Oil built up over days, sometimes weeks. For the elite, wigs became both a solution and a new form of high-maintenance misery, demanding their own rituals of powdering, brushing, and occasionally, fumigation. If you weren't wearing a powdered wig, your own hair would be subjected to an array of home-brewed solutions. Grease wasn't seen as an enemy. Sometimes it was even considered a sign of vitality, at least until the shine turned into blinding beams of reflective light. Enter starch and herbs. With a practiced hand, a valet or lady's maid would dust your locks with a mixture of wheat starch, ground rice, or potato flour, often scented with lavender, jasmine, or orris root. The effect? Mattified roots and a delightful impression of living inside a bakery. Of course, this dry shampoo was far from perfect. For one, the powders clung to everything. skin, collars, the unfortunate upholstery. Combs and brushes helped reduce the excess, but the result was often a gentle fallout with every movement. Casually flicking your hair at a gathering risked leaving visible stardust on your companions, which, depending on your status, was either a slightly scandalous faux pas or a charming power play. Desperate times called for desperate measures. In especially greasy seasons, which, given the lack of water heating or privacy, was most of the year, people tried more assertive interventions. Vinegar rinses cut through oil but left a sharp residue. Fuller's earth, a clay used in laundering wool, sometimes appeared in hair care routines for the determined and the brave. But for the average person, regular powdering was the fastest route to passable hair. This ritual, though time-consuming, was also social. Powdering rooms in the homes of the wealthy were as essential as pantries, with walls ghostly white from years of excess. Servants inhaled clouds of starch with every shift, while the upper class exchanged witticisms through a haze of fine, white dust. The performance was meticulous, involving aprons, masks, and sometimes even bellows to spread the powder evenly across elaborate coiffures. A day in polite society meant constant touch-ups, a far cry from today's 2-minute showers. Even with all this effort, hair health often languished. Scalp irritation, itching, and occasional outbreaks of lice were common. The build-up of powder and oil created an environment beloved by more than one kind of critter, requiring regular delousing with ivory combs and the occasional moonlit head shave. Still, the appearance of freshness won out over comfort or convenience. And yet, despite the trials, the powdered look caught on. It became the fashion of courts and salons, lending a pale, ethereal glow that could help you pass as someone who slept for 9 hours in silk sheets. Never mind the reality of knots and frustration beneath the surface. For some, the ritual was a point of pride. For others, just another item on the endless checklist of looking presentable. Today, as we reach for a quick spritz of modern dry shampoo or a clarifying wash, it's easy to forget the long tradition of ingenuity and the faint smell of pastries that once marked the battle against greasy hair. Let me know if you'd like this further tailored or sectioned by specific themes. Closing your corset? Good luck, your lead makeup sheds a fine sparkling dust down your bodice, leaving you looking like you fought a flour mill and lost. And that's just the prelude, the overture, if you will. Before you have even managed to tie the last ribbon, the first wardrobe crisis is lurking around the corner. Let's talk stays. Those marvels of 18th century engineering designed, perhaps, with the sole purpose of reminding you that breathing is truly optional. The moment you dare to inhale deeply, the string lacing at the back threatens to catapult a stray whalebone across the room. It's less Jane Austen, more slapstick physics demonstration. But it wasn't just tightness that challenged you. The layers, petticoats, shifts, stockings, combined into a feat of textile origami, so complex that any sudden movement risks unraveling the entire ensemble. Try sitting gracefully. If you now manage it, congratulations, you have joined an elite club whose membership includes exactly 5 people throughout history, all of whom were painted sitting absolutely still because movement was out of the question. Now, let's consider the footwear. 18th century shoes, displaying all the support of a cocktail napkin and the durability of wet cardboard. On a dewy morning, expect to slip elegantly, if unintentionally, down the gravel drive. Not to worry, your voluminous petticoats will cushion the fall, though you'll be gathering gravel, and possibly the odd bug, as you rise. No wardrobe discussion would be complete without mentioning bodices. By midday, you notice the seams starting to sigh under the strain. A poorly timed sneeze or a hearty laugh and you're left clutching at pins, hoping no one noticed your sudden transformation into a historical interpretation of a loose cannon. Speaking of which, if your gown included elaborate bows or decorative fans, rest assured, one will detach and make a break for it at the least opportune moment. Perhaps during a grand entrance, perhaps as you attempt to flirt in clever, demure fashion. Makeup brings its own hazards. Remember that shimmering dust from your lead-based foundation. As the day wears on, you'll find it has migrated to places makeup was never intended, highlighting collarbones, sleeves, and the occasional bystander. It grants you a certain ethereal glow, only if your idea of ethereal is haunted flour sack. If you're lucky, only your clothing absorbs the damage. If unlucky, the unfortunate soul who attempts a chivalrous hand kiss will be left sporting a ghostly thumbprint for the remainder of the evening. Let's not forget the grand finale, accidental exfoliation. No spa necessary. Simply endure a few hours in costume, and your skin will be scrubbed raw by scratchy seams, stiff lace, and boning with all the gentleness of steel wool. After one long day, you'll emerge feeling sanded and polished, though not in the glamorous sense. And still, there's a certain camaraderie in it all. The sidelong glances, the whispered jokes. Is your stocking falling down again? Or did your petticoat just make a break for freedom too? It's hard not to laugh at a world where the biggest fashion emergency is being slowly consumed by your own underpinnings. Accidental exfoliation and errant feathers become badges of honor. You made it through the day. You wore the history. You lived to tell the tale, even if you're still vacuuming glitter out of your décolletage next week. In the grand scheme, these wardrobe malfunctions were a gentle, itchy reminder that dignity and composure were optional. Survival, on the other hand, was mandatory, and at least you looked fabulous as you bravely disintegrated, one silken thread at a time. Courtship rituals involve long gazes, light hand touches, and the thrilling game of who will collapse first. Is it love or is it arsenic? The two are almost indistinguishable. In the candlelit parlours of the 19th century, romance unfurled itself in slow, deliberate acts. Nothing was rushed, not even death. Consider the way suitors would gather in drawing rooms, searching for poetic reasons to linger. Was it her wit or her dangerously flushed cheeks? The sign of passion, or merely a symptom? With each whispered compliment, another dose of invisible risk. The era's hottest accessory, a delicate cough, equal parts mystery, and warning label. Nothing says marriage material quite like tuberculosis chic. Courtship, at its core, was really about two people navigating a minefield of social mores and subtle poisonings, sometimes quite literally. Young women, corseted to near asphyxiation, fluttered fans beneath burning gas lamps, fluttering all the harder when those lamps leaked invisible clouds of deadly fumes. Nervous hands might deliver love notes scented with lilac and trace amounts of mercury. Each passing glance carried enough voltage to light up a Victorian sanatorium. Each touch, a daredevil's handshake with fate. And then there were the garden strolls. Suitors and sweethearts walked arm in arm beneath sprays of foxglove and nightshade, perhaps whispering poetry, perhaps gently wondering which would be the last word spoken before someone needed to lie down, a little longer than usual. Sometimes the thrill wasn't just emotional, but delightfully toxic. Who could resist the temptation to pluck a wildflower, unaware that it doubled as a pharmacological warning? In an age without dating apps, nothing was more magnetic than the sense that one's beloved might be the last person you ever saw. It was not just the women who suffered for beauty, or men who played the fool for love. Both were subject to a world brimming with hazards masquerading as romance. Perfume bottles, newly imported and explosively popular, contained scents strong enough to mask the aroma of slow poisoning, and sometimes of open fires ignited by unwise flirtations with candle flames and crinoline skirts. Love poems promised eternity together, while the sender hedged bets with a double dose of laudanum to settle the nerves. And let us not forget the lovesick letters, delivered by nervous footmen who paused just long enough to wipe lead dust from their gloves. Each sealed envelope, heavy with yearning, also packed a punch of contamination. It was only polite. Sometimes the missives were tear-stained, sometimes merely seasoned with a dash of arsenic-green ink, itself a chemical marvel admired for both its vibrance and its lethality. In matters of the heart, press too hard with a pen, and you might start an epidemic. But therein lay the true romantic tension, the uncertain arithmetic of affection and annihilation. Would her father approve? Would his estate withstand the next typhoid outbreak? Would they live long enough to say, "I love you," or merely to cough impressively in each other's presence? Courtship meant teetering on the brink, hand in hand and breathless, sometimes from anticipation, sometimes because the windows had been sealed to keep out the city's rank miasmas. Ultimately, to flirt in these times was to flirt with disaster. Every tryst was a calculated risk, every sigh a coin tossed to the grim reaper. The line between infatuation and expiration was as thin as a silk glove, and twice as easily torn. The game was dangerous, delicious, and occasionally lethal, so it's no wonder they called it falling in love. In the end, perhaps that's what made those candle-lit proposals so impossibly heady. To say yes was to accept not just a suitor, but the thrilling possibility that you might both, quite literally, go out together. Queen Elizabeth sets every trend while surviving on a steady diet of sugar, wine, and layers of lead. You wonder if her secret is confidence, or just not reading the ingredient label. Royal tastes and indulgences echo far beyond the palace walls. Whatever appears at the royal table or on the backs of the monarch inevitably finds its way into the homes and mouths of their subjects, often with dramatic, sometimes dangerous consequences. For Elizabethan England, this meant that if Her Majesty favoured goose, quince marmalade, or a glistening sugared peel, so too did the aspiring gentry, eager to signal their upward mobility by copying royal habits. Royalty didn't just set fashion or food trends, they extended their power through style, creating a trickle-down effect that left a kaleidoscope of new habits, vices, and sometimes illnesses. In the glittering tapestry of the court, whatever Queen Elizabeth dipped her spoon into, or slipped onto her skin, transformed instantly into an object of desire. Her preference for puffy collars and starched ruffs, for instance, was less about comfort and more about projecting untouchable majesty. These outlandishly stiff collars, layered with delicate lace imported at great cost, forced nobles to maintain the perfect regal posture, lest a wilting ruff expose their lack of royal discipline. Copying Elizabeth's look wasn't just a matter of trendiness, it was a bid to align visibly with power, a wearable plea for royal favour. But the royal influence didn't stop at ornamentation. Every aspect of Elizabeth's image was carefully crafted and zealously imitated, even when it bordered on the hazardous. To achieve her signature porcelain white skin, Elizabeth slathered her face with Venetian ceruse, a foundation made with white lead and vinegar. This deadly mixture concealed scars, illuminated her complexion, and projected the illusion of untouched, godlike purity. Never mind that the makeup slowly poisoned the wearer. If the Queen did it, so would everyone else. The court, and soon the city became filled with ashen, powdered faces, each one chasing an unattainable royal ideal at the expense of their own health. What's astounding is how far and wide this royal mimicry travelled. Recipes from the court kitchen slipped quietly into well-to-do households. The sweet perfumes and imported sugar confections Elizabeth adored filtered down to the merchant class, lending an air of sophistication and more than a few rotten teeth. When she picked up new styles or exotic ingredients, the world noticed. It didn't matter if the trend was expensive, impractical, or downright deadly. The allure was all in its royal provenance. Yet for the Queen, there was always a method behind the madness. Each fashion or food choice was a statement, a signal to her court and to rival monarchies. Her vibrant red wigs masked her thinning hair and sent a signal of vitality. Her love of elaborate symbolic jewellery, locks, anchors and serpents was both personal shield and public spectacle. She used style to reinforce her position as an unattainable ideal. The Virgin Queen, untouched by ordinary concerns. Every courtier's desperate attempt to imitate her was, at the same time, a public acknowledgement of her supremacy. Try as they might, none could match her, or, in some cases, survive the attempt unscathed. When you trace the trends outward from the palace, you find the influence of royalty isn't just seen in fashion plates and dinner menus, but in the very fabric of society. The gilded look of Elizabeth's court set the pace for artisans, traders, and farmers alike. Lacemakers wove night and day to meet demand. Sugar importers thrived. Apothecaries peddled increasingly fanciful cosmetics. Royal preference became economic opportunity, and, at times, public hazard. At first glance, Queen Elizabeth's seeming immortality, her ability to outlast trends, rivals, and perhaps her own dangerous routines, looks like magic. But perhaps her greatest trick was convincing an entire nation that her tastes weren't just better. They were the only ones worth having. The pulpit says vanity is a sin. You nod solemnly while touching up your purity palette. Clearly, God must appreciate the effort. Religions across the world have always wrestled with the question of self-admiration and the desire to look good. In the hushed interior of a church or the hallowed corners of a mosque, warnings against vanity echo off ancient stones. The message is consistent. Pride in your appearance risks leading you astray. Yet here you are, fingers poised at the mirror, both a congregant and a work in progress. How did vanity become such a symbolic battleground? Christianity is perhaps the most vocal about the perils of vanity. In medieval sermons, those fire and brimstone orations that threatened hellfire for impure thoughts, the audience got more than a little nervous about looking in mirrors. "Pride goeth before destruction," thundered the preacher, "and a haughty spirit before a fall." Stories of saints renouncing worldly beauty circulated hand in hand with paintings of ethereal, glowing Madonnas, a contradiction both stark and oddly reassuring. You might sympathize with these saints, swearing off concealer in a whirl of regret, only to later wonder if Jesus would approve of subtle highlighter. Islamic teachings, too, offer guidance. The Prophet Muhammad urged his followers toward humility, warning against arrogance and ostentatious display. Yet he also reminded them to look clean and presentable, a contradiction spelled out in countless Friday khutbahs. Cleanliness is half of faith, the Imam proclaims. And there you are, straightening your collar, aware that self-respect and vanity are braided tighter than a fishtail plait. Hinduism enters the conversation with a unique twist. The body is both temple and illusion. Tales from the Vedas and Upanishads tell believers that attachment to physical beauty traps the soul in the endless cycle of rebirth. But then Diwali arrives, and families don their finest saris and jewellery, celebrating radiance as devotion. You realize spiritual life isn't so much about eschewing beauty as understanding where it belongs on the altar. Across the world, Buddhism takes an adjacent seat. The Buddha cautioned against excessive attachment. Vanity was seen as a barrier to enlightenment, a shimmer on water that draws the eye away from spiritual depth. Yet in the same doctrine, caring for yourself is a sign of mindfulness, of honoring the impermanence and fragility of your mortal form. The razor's edge of self-perception is lovingly applying moisturizer, a distraction, or a brief meditation in compassion. Even outside organized religion, cultures have rituals, rites of passage, where beauty is sanctified, not scorned. A coming-of-age ceremony, face painted with saffron and kohl. A baptism, a white dress symbolizing purity. These moments show that appearance can be both sacred and suspect, depending on who sets the rules. Yet religious warnings against vanity often reveal more about human anxiety than about the divine. What if God, or whatever higher power you believe in, understands insecurity as well as anyone? The urge to look good isn't just about pride, but about belonging, finding favor, finding love, and sometimes finding yourself after heartbreak. The difference between self-care and vanity is why sermons, teachings, and parables keep circling back to the same paradox. You are made in the image of something holy, but don't get too comfortable admiring the reflection. So, as you leave the church, mosque, or temple, another thought sneaks in. Perhaps the real lesson is to step out with gentle confidence. Let modesty and authenticity walk hand in hand with eyeliner and aftershave. Maybe God isn't tabulating lipstick applications or counting the number of glances in the mirror. Maybe the measure of your heart isn't in your mascara, but in the kindness you show yourself and others each time you pass by your own reflection. Your grandmother shares century-old beauty tips. Gargle with vinegar, dab on some more paste, and marry rich so you don't have to walk uphill to gather ingredients. You make a note. Every family has its own canon of beauty rituals, handed down like keepsakes or the odd chipped heirloom. In yours, beauty advice arrives, accompanied by the clink of teacups, voices rustling over each other in the kitchen. Your mother insists on the Holy Trinity: sleep, sunscreen, and skepticism. She has spent a lifetime eyeing marketing emails and miracle creams with suspicion, and tells you that the secret glow comes only from not getting your hopes up too high. Cucumber slices for the eyes, she says, layering thin coins on her lids. Drink water, but if you must, wine will do. You nod, unsure if you're being tutored or initiated. Your aunt is a contrarian. She swears by eggs, everywhere. Rub egg white on your nose to snatch your pores. Whisk a yolk into mayonnaise, and your hair will shine like glass. Once, years ago, she walked out of the house with egg yolk streaks drying like pale yellow war paint. It's all protein, she declared. The more, the better. You, cautious and loyal to your shampoo, smile and promise to try it someday, just not before a first date. As stories are ladled out with soup, you realize beauty in the family is a group activity, a ritual, a game, a subtle negotiation of values and vanity. Your cousin, perched on a stool and scrolling through her phone, consults not only family, but the trending forums of TikTok. Last week, she slugged her face with petroleum jelly, slept sticking to her pillow. On the phone, she declares, "Great skin is 50% genetics, 50% hacks." The family nods, as if modern advice can blend seamlessly into old recipes. Someone always brings up remedies that hover between myth and medicine. Rub wet tea bags on tired eyes. Sleep with a metal spoon in the fridge, then rest it on puffy cheeks. Honey is for burns, sugar for scrubs, lemon for elbows if you dare risk smelling like lemonade. Sometimes these rituals meet with science. More often, they clash. The phrase, "in our day," is repeated, as if to reinforce that each generation's struggle for beauty is noble, if not victorious. You begin to collect these relics, scribbling them down, wondering which will stick. Do you boil rice water for your hair, or invest in the latest serums? In your family, the answer is both, tradition and curiosity colliding. Your grandmother walks by and pats your cheek, leaving a faint scent of rosewater and history. She offers her most vital advice. Beauty fades, humour ages better. The family laughs, but you suspect this is the only piece everyone agrees on. As the afternoon wanes, beauty talk drifts to stories of failed experiments. The time an impromptu turmeric mask left your father with a yellow hue for days, or how your great-uncle once mistook nail hardener for eye drops. The laughter is part of the inheritance too. You realize beauty in your family isn't really about attaining flawlessness, but finding the joy, the mischief, the stories in the pursuit. The segment closes with you at your mirror, caught in a patchwork of old wisdom and new products. You weigh vinegar against toner, cucumbers against cool packs, hopeful that perhaps magic lies not in the potion, but in the ritual, the voices echoing their advice in your head. Your notebook is full, your cheeks faintly pink from a little too much experimentation, and you think maybe happiness is the best glow of all. For now, you commit to both, following family recipes and forging your own. No massages or cucumber water here. Spa day means sitting in a lead bath, putting on a clay mask, and hoping nothing falls off by morning. You may associate spa with relaxing music, scented candles, and maybe a splash of Prosecco. In Tudor England, however, taking the waters was less treat yourself and more gambler's roulette with your health. Spas, or bathhouses, weren't about pampering so much as surviving the latest round of weird beauty advice and medical guesswork. Let's set the scene. Instead of padding about in fluffy robes, imagine donning a stiff linen shift and shuffling into a communal tub, all while eyeing that suspiciously green-tinged water and wondering how many other Tudors have floated in here since last Wednesday. It all started with a good soak. The Tudors swore by baths of healing, which meant stewing yourself in a wooden tub filled with water, sometimes laced with local minerals. Bath, the famous English spa city, was popular for its hot spring waters, but the Tudors couldn't just leave well enough alone. Medieval wisdom and superstition encouraged tossing in a random assortment of herbs, roots, and occasionally a pinch of lead powder for that extra, purifying touch. You might emerge from your bath not only a little cleaner, but also a bit closer to lead poisoning. Call it a detox Tudor style. Next on the spa menu, mud masks, but don't expect the gentle, mineral-rich clays of today's beauty stores. Instead, Tudor mud packs were often mixed with vinegar, ground oyster shells, or even mercury, especially if you fancied whiter skin, a sign of nobility, because tans were for peasants who worked outside. A Tudor lady would slather on her homemade potion, recline on her bed, and hope the only thing that peeled off later was the mask and not her skin. Dead skin removal. Mission accomplished, perhaps a bit too vigorously. You're probably thinking, surely there was more to relaxation than baths and masks. And indeed, there was. Sweating, the Tudor cure-all. Sweating baths, known as stews, involved sitting in a sealed and heated wooden room. Picture a sauna built by a carpenter who's never seen a real one. The logic: sweat out the toxins, draw out evil humours, and leave feeling reborn. In reality, you often left dizzy, dehydrated, and smelling less than spring fresh. A day at a Tudor spa didn't end with a refreshing facial. For adventurous types, there were leech treatments for blood purification and hair removal ceremonies that required a strong stomach and even stronger tweezers. Popular methods included using raw eggs, vinegar, or even arsenic pastes. Pain was part of the beauty process, and inflamed red skin was simply a sign that it was working. Suffering for beauty. The Tudors practically invented it, and perhaps, standing in for today's spa juice cleanse, Tudors might drink dubious health waters, concocted from dandelion, nettle, or random wildflowers. The effects range from mild indigestion to, well, nobody wrote down the exact side effects, possibly because they were too distracted by the next miracle mud mask. In sum, the Tudor version of self-care was a blend of superstition, herbal remedies, and a healthy dose of discomfort. There were no fluffy slippers or tranquil soundtracks, only a vague hope that one's spa day would not end with a rash, fainting spell, or the loss of an eyebrow. Yet, in the absence of real science, these rituals offered a kind of community spirit and brief reprieve from daily life, plus good gossip fodder for the next market day. So, the next time you recline in a candlelit spa, sipping cucumber water, thank your lucky stars for modern hygiene, and that your facial will never involve mercury, arsenic, or leeches. The Tudors may have pioneered the spa day, but let's agree, some traditions are best left in the past. Suddenly unwell? The remedy: more lead, plus a herbal poultice, a leech or 3, and positive thoughts. You start shopping for a will. In an age when the doctor's bag was a jumble of mystery, magic, and menace, falling ill meant embarking on an unpredictable journey, one with uncertain destinations and even more dubious companions. The very phrase, medical emergency, conjured images not of clarity and action, but of frenzied guesswork. Apothecaries muttering under their breath, physicians tracing veins with trembling fingers, nurses clutching a handful of amulets. If you thought a sudden fever might be met with clinical calm, think again. More likely, it was an opportunity for a bit of drama, a dab of hope, and plenty of pageantry. First, the diagnosis. A cursory glance at your tongue, perhaps a sniff of your chamber pot, and a good shake of the palm. A technique believed to reveal everything from bilious humours to bad fortune. The outcome was rarely precise, but always imaginative. Spleen overload, humoral excess, or on the off chance, a visitation by spirits. Regardless of label, the prescription rarely changed. Ancient tradition dictated that illness must be drawn out, much like an unwelcome guest, and to do so required a chemical and physical barrage. Enter the leeches. No self-respecting medical professional would forgo the opportunity to attach several of these squirming little vampires to your arms, legs, or, if luck deserted you, your eyelids. The idea, such as it was, hinged on the belief that diseases festered within an overabundance of blood, and thus, letting some of it out could only help. Your household might even keep a jar or two for emergencies, right beside the brandy, one for courage, the other for bloodletting. If bleeding didn't suffice, the next course favoured purging. Powders of antimony and mercury, names best left unspoken, were stirred into tonics or pressed into pills, then ingested with brave resignation. The resulting effects were, in a word, cathartic. Twain himself might have called it explosive. Not to be outdone, some healers advocated for a hearty round of cupping, which left you not only unwell, but spectacularly polka-dotted. Even hot irons, wielded in the service of counter-irritation, made searing appearances in the history of cures. A reminder that desperation often forges strange alliances with fire. Strikingly, herbal remedies shared pride of place in the household arsenal. Powdered willow bark for aches, foxglove for a fluttering heart, or for more persistent maladies, tinctures brewed from every conceivable root, leaf, and petal. Certain healers swore by concoctions so secretive their recipes died with them. Others published grandiose pamphlets touting universal elixirs, guaranteed to cure everything except, alas, gullibility. Of course, behind every treatment lurked the quiet threat of quackery. Itinerant salesmen, peddling snake oil with operatic flair, became fixtures at markets and fairs. Their testimonials, sometimes shouted, sometimes sung, promised miraculous recoveries from gout, ague, and melancholia, if only you purchased this one last proprietary bottle. It was the great lottery of cures. If belief didn't heal you, perhaps the alcohol content would numb you. Even the most rational physicians insisted that a patient's temperament, their prevailing moods, and, above all, their optimism, played a vital role in recovery. Positive thinking, urged with enthusiasm, rounded out these medical interventions. Should you succumb despite all measures, your doctor was seldom at fault. Instead, mourners lamented your lack of cheerful hope. Thus, a sudden illness became a theatre of expectation. Friends arrived to hold your hand or whisper about your inheritance. Priests hovered, unconvinced by the promise of the cure. Meanwhile, you, patched and punctured, weighed your odds and quietly wished for genuine respite or, failing that, a swifter route to peace. In the end, emerging from this ritual tapestry, you'd gained a little wisdom. If not a cure, then at least a good story. One featuring bloodletting, burnt feathers, and a cast of characters you preferred never to see again. Next time, perhaps, you'll simply endure the headache. Gossip spreads like lice. If someone spots a rash near your jawline, you say, "It's just the new Italian look." By evening, half the town tries it, and the doctor moves one step closer to retirement. Rumours have a rhythm of their own. One whisper at the bakery, a knowing glance at the market, and suddenly everyone's got the same fever, and an opinion to match. The speed at which stories morph is almost athletic. By lunchtime, your new Italian look is rumoured to be contagious, chic, and possibly lethal if paired with blue shoes. Reputation management here isn't just about setting the story straight. It's about learning to direct the orchestra, to conduct the swell and hush of curiosity around you. The first rule: never panic in public. The more unbothered you appear, the likelier it is the rumour will mutate into something harmless or, better still, spark the next fashion craze. A raised eyebrow and a sly, "Oh, that's what they're saying now?" can do more for your reputation than 100 self-defensive speeches. Deflection, you'll find, is more effective than denial. Why scream your innocence when you could instead pose a riddle, or add a wink and walk away? Reputation is currency, but like any currency, its value is set by public perception. It's perilous to try and quash every whisper. People want a story, and if you take one story away, they'll invent 3 more. Sometimes the wisest move is to let rumours run their course, allowing their sheer absurdity to reveal itself. One day, you're spotted stepping into the butcher's shop twice, and, by midnight, you're suspected of running a clandestine meat racket. The next week, nobody remembers because Mrs. Leone's cat was mistaken for a baby wolf. There's an art to harnessing the town's collective imagination. Become a little bit mysterious. Let people wonder about your late-night walks or your sudden fondness for the colour green. Give them just enough strangeness to keep them entertained, but not enough to make you a target for genuine suspicion. An air of enigma, after all, often transforms gossip from a threat into a buffer. As long as the rumours are playful, you're safer than if all is known. Of course, there are times when you must intervene, should the rumour stray into true harm. Insult cast at your family, slander laced with malice. It's time to enlist allies. Grandmothers, children, and local merchants are the most reliable rumour blockers. They carry stories as deftly as they carry baskets. A well-placed declaration from Nonna at the fountain, or an overheard defence in the bakery queue, can turn tides faster than any soliloquy delivered at town hall. Grace under fire is your secret weapon. However tempting it is to bite back, a measured, even whimsical response often works wonders. Turn a rumour about your forbidden garden into a new tomato sauce recipe. Before you know it, people forget why they were whispering and show up at your door for a taste. In time, you'll become a legend, not for what was said about you, but for how you spun it, repackaged it, and served it back to the town, preferably garnished with basil. Rumours, like fashions, come and go. Some cling a little longer like a stubborn stain, but most fade with the next wind. What matters is not erasing every splotch, but knowing which to paint over, which to parade, and which to simply outlast. In the end, reputation is less a mirror than a mosaic, and a good bit of the art lies in knowing how to use every coloured shard. So the next time a whisper follows your steps, remember, some shoes are built for walking, others for tap dancing. If you must be the subject of gossip, let it be for your grace, wit, and capacity to turn even the wildest story into something worth celebrating. You pen your beauty secrets in a notebook, along with "do not eat" on every page. Hundreds of years later, historians will shake their heads in disbelief at your dedication. Picture this: your great-grandchildren, centuries from now, uncover a battered old journal tucked away in the back of an attic. The cover, worn smooth by time, creaks open to reveal instructions written in bold, looping script. Lip balm recipe, beeswax, olive oil, and just enough peppermint to make your lips tingle, but not enough to induce panic. Also, do not eat. They squint at your warning, wondering which ancestor had the audacity to make beauty look so dangerously snackable. They may even host family reunions just to debate whether the honey mask was an actual mask or an elaborate ploy to keep the kids out of the pantry. This is the magic of beauty secrets. They are rarely about face value. Rather, they are about connection, hands moving in the same rhythm, mixing, testing, adjusting. The simple act of passing a recipe, a hair rinse, a scrub, and advice on how to wield a bobby pin in times of crisis, becomes an invisible ribbon, binding one generation to the next. Family beauty lore isn't just relayed through notebooks either. Sometimes it's passed in fleeting moments in kitchens or bathrooms, always with that air of importance usually reserved for state secrets. The rolling pin for baking morphs into a makeshift pressing tool for infusing herbs into oils. The no talking rule during the application of an egg white mask isn't to prevent laughter. It's simply practical, as anyone who's tried to crack a smile with a face full of meringue will attest. Every family seems to have that one story. The disastrous attempt at home hair dye in the 1970s that resulted in a hue not found in nature. The aunt who swore by mayonnaise as an all-purpose miracle at the cost of a week smelling like a sandwich. The secret strategy for hiding sunburns or split ends just before summer was over. And with every retelling, the story gets a bit more dramatic. A reminder that beauty, like any tradition, is part art, part myth-making. There's also a universal thrill in the forbidden, the whispered advice over the phone, the passed-along bottle of imported face cream, or the outlandish tip gleaned from a magazine and tried late at night with a flashlight in the bathroom mirror. One generation's innovation becomes the next generation's time-honored tradition, sometimes with a few improvements, sometimes with a "don't try this at home" postscript. Yet, the notebook persists. Each page is a snapshot, a note in your mother's handwriting about the magic of sleeping on a silk pillowcase, your own commentary about the slipperiness of cucumbers and why they are best reserved for salads, not eye masks. There might even be a recipe scrawled in a rush, margins filled with warnings. Do not substitute garlic for ginger unless you like to keep friends at a distance. Over time, this collection becomes much more than a compendium of beauty hacks. It is a living family history, proof that dedication to self-care is, in itself, a legacy. When your descendants turn those delicate, spidery pages, they'll see more than just instructions. They'll sense your humour, your trials, and your triumphs at the bathroom sink. They'll learn that beauty, whatever form it takes, is both a gift and an inside joke. So, pen your secrets. Fill the margins with warnings and witticisms. The next generation will appreciate your wisdom, and, perhaps even more, your reminder not to eat the face mask no matter how good it smells. Strict regulations. Never heard of them. You trade with ambitious merchants for the purest powders, which may contain anything from brick dust to questionable animal bits. Welcome to the beauty black market, where looks could truly kill. It's the late 1800s, and your beauty cabinet resembles less a high-end vanity and more a chemistry experiment, with results no one can predict. Face whitening powders, blushes, and lavish lip tints spill from apothecary jars, each promising ethereal beauty. But their innocent pastels hide unthinkable secrets. What's really in these concoctions anything but pure? You line your eyes with coal dark as midnight. It stings. But hey, so does beauty. Nobody warns you coal is laced with lead and antimony, metals mined without a second thought for hygiene or human safety. Over time, your dazzling gaze wavers. Your health does too. That youthful radiance. Sometimes it's actually anemia, exhaustion, and persistent headaches, delivered courtesy of your morning routine. Blush offers hope for a rosy glow. But behind the glamorous facade is a who's who of the animal kingdom. Crushed beetles for carmine dye, fish scales for shimmer, even the odd scraping of ox blood. And let's not forget the secret filler. Brick dust, ground finely, and slipped in by greedy merchants looking to stretch their goods. Did your cheeks just itch? Or is that your imagination? Better not ask. When suspicions arise and your local supplier's powders look a shade too rustic, you know it's time to visit the underground market. Here, veiled whispers guide buyers to shadowy stalls. You think you're discreet, but it's an open secret. Everyone's chasing that elusive, dangerous glamour. There are rumours, maybe even true ones, of batches laced with arsenic. One swipe could bring a flush to your face, a fever to your brow, and a slow, silent decline. The truth is, nobody understands what these substances will do tomorrow, let alone next year. Beauty is a status symbol, but it's one bought at a steep price. Each tin and pot is a roll of the dice. Will it make you stand out at the ball or send you straight to your bed for a week? The city's physicians privately curse the cosmetics craze. They've seen the tremors, the rashes, the sudden, unexplained illnesses. But the market is unregulated. There are no labels, no recalls, and certainly no dermatologically tested stamp. And what about those who can't afford bespoke blends? There's always someone hawking bootleg blush, advertised as imported, but made in a back alley with substances best left unnamed. Some women grow addicted to the thrill, not just of looking younger, but of living dangerously, each rouge and powder a tiny rebellion. Scandalizing headlines occasionally break. Society belle hospitalized after powder mishap. The public feigns shock, but most are back at the market by next week, eyes peeled for the latest trend. In truth, these stories only make the risks seem more glamorous. If the blush was too strong for her, perhaps you, braver, smarter, luckier, will escape unscathed. It isn't until much later, after years of secrecy and whispered warnings, that governments step in with real oversight. But by then, countless faces have paid the price, their complexions forever changed by brick dust, beetle wings, and the silent threat of contamination. Even now, as you close your powder tin and admire your reflection, there's a part of you that wonders, at what cost beauty? The black market survives because it feeds on hope, vanity, and risk. Brick dust has its own allure, especially when the alternative is simply fading away. Bedtime means scraping your face with a cloth, hoping not to remove anything essential. You ignore the slight metallic taste and focus on chanting your favorite healing prayers. After the day's noise and interaction, both wanted and unwanted, the solitude of the bathroom feels like a fragile shelter. The harsh overhead light betrays you, illuminating every line and blemish, every new irritation revealed after a long, public day. Slowly, you work the cloth's fibers across your jaw, feeling the tug as yesterday's hope, carefully applied in the morning's quiet optimism, dissolves into grey streaks on the cotton. It's strange, this ritual, part hygiene, part erasure, as if you could peel back the layers and reveal something simpler, more authentic, underneath. Instead, you're left with a strange sense of loss, scraped raw and not quite certain if the essential parts of you survive the process. You lean over the sink, trailing water around its rim, and catch your reflection again, blurred now by streaks of cleanser and steam. It's in moments like these that regret sidles up beside you. Regret over words carelessly spoken, or not spoken at all, of glances that lingered too long, or slipped away too fast. Little regrets stack up, pebble on pebble, and form an unfamiliar landscape inside your head. Removing your war paint, you're forced to confront not just tired skin, but tired stories you carry beneath it. You try to keep your hands gentle, but there's always an edge. Some part of you is angry. Angry that it takes these layers, creams, balms, concealers, to participate in the daily theatre outside your door. Angry at the way you measure a good day by how evenly your makeup survived, or how little you had to touch up in the bathroom between meetings. Angry, even, at the small betrayals of your own body, the way your skin refuses to behave, erupting in protest at the faintest provocation. But you whisper forgiveness into the mirror and towel off what remains. Here, in the quiet hush between day and night, you grant yourself permission to be uncertain. The prayers you chant, sometimes under your breath, sometimes a silent procession in your mind, aren't just for healing blemishes or soothing skin. They're for the deeper hurts, the ones that can't be massaged away with a luxury serum or hidden with full coverage foundation. The prayers are for lost time, for the versions of yourself you left behind in tubes and jars and bottles. Sometimes, in the blurry half-light just before bed, you allow yourself to imagine a different routine. One where cleansing is simply about comfort, not correction. A world in which you don't fear the vulnerable moment when the mask comes off, but instead greet your reflection with the tenderness you reserve for small animals or dear friends. Maybe, you think, regret has served its purpose, to remind you of what matters, to show you where you need love more than another product. You finish by smoothing a final, scentless cream over your cheeks, as though you could seal away the day's ache. You switch off the bathroom light, stepping softly through the threshold into darkness. Somewhere between prayer and sleep, you catch a fleeting glimpse of grace. The idea that tomorrow, perhaps, you will wear a little less armor. That the process of removal, as painful as it sometimes is, may eventually lead you back to something essential, something that was never really lost. As you settle into bed, the metallic taste has faded, replaced by the cotton-mouth dryness of anticipation. You lie very still, conscious of your breaths counting down the seconds to sleep. You murmur your final blessing, not for flawless skin or a perfect audience, but for the courage to remove what no longer serves you, and the gentleness to forgive yourself for the precious things you once believed you had to erase. You sometimes daydream about a world where pale faces are optional, makeup is reversible, and there's an ingredient list longer than bad idea. Maybe it starts as a simple wish, the kind you nurse on a blazing July afternoon as you squint past the brim of your hat, already calculating how much longer before your SPF 50 becomes SPF not even trying. You picture stepping outside, unbothered by the molten wrath of the midday sun, your skin shielded not by sticky relics from the 90s, but a seraphic, invisible armor whipped up by actual science, not just wishful thinking with a hint of coconut. In this parallel universe, sunscreen doesn't leave you shinier than a glazed donut or transform your phone screen into a slip and slide every time you answer a call post-application. Instead, there are options that suit every skin type, climate, mood, and vanity. There's a SPF for when you feel like a French movie star on the Riviera, and one for when you know you'll be running for the subway, colliding sweatily with friendly strangers who also forgot their hats and better judgment. The real showstopper, though, is the ingredient list. Picture sunscreen cartons so detailed and transparent that even your most ingredient-obsessed friend, the one who scrutinizes every label with the intensity of a Supreme Court justice, gives a magnanimous nod of approval. Oh, this one contains niacinamide, hyaluronic acid, and something called cloud essence. Sounds legit. In this SPF utopia, the only thing longer than the ingredient list is the assurance that each component is safe, effective, and, crucially, pronounceable. Of course, in this fantasy, paleness becomes a choice, not a weathered badge of caution or a testimony to your devotion to the dermatologist's instructions. Those with a penchant for a sun-kissed glow choose it safely, using products that mimic the affection of a gentle July evening, not the reddish regret of midday sunburns. The rest of us, happily, remain as ghostly or golden as we please, without sparking unsolicited advice from relatives at family barbecues. But let's not stop at appearance. This dream extends its generosity to makeup. Imagine a world where full coverage is a casual setting, like adjusting your seats in a self-driving car. It's no longer a badge of shame to wash off your contour at 3 p.m. or, heaven forbid, decide to switch up your look entirely after lunch. Your makeup works with your SPF rather than staging a passive-aggressive standoff. Foundation glides on, blush blooms. Nothing peels, pills, or rebels. It's a truce signed at dawn between skincare and cosmetics, and your face is the benevolent monarchy that benefits. And if ever a friend forgets their sunscreen, because dreaming doesn't replace realism after all, there's always a vast communal dispenser, like the water fountains of the ancient world, but with a pump and a light yet dignified SPF scent. To the sun becomes a toast, not a lament. Is this all too much to ask? Maybe. But dreaming is free, and SPF, at its heart, is hope in a bottle. hope for more time outdoors, skin healthy enough to someday meet grandkids, and the luxury of choice. If we're lucky, future generations will marvel at the old myths, the stinging eyes, the chalky noses, the suspiciously greasy selfies. They'll slather, spray, or swipe their skincare like second nature and thank the ancestors who dared to dream of a future where every face, in every shade, gets its happy ending in the sun. So for now, you apply your best SPF, dream in broad spectrum, and wait patiently for the future to catch up. Some dreams, after all, are worth the reapplication. Centuries from now, your great-great-great-grandchildren will marvel at what you endured for likes that hadn't been invented yet. You paved the way for bronzer and dermatologists. It's hard to overstate how much of modern beauty culture is haunted by the ghost of Tudor ambition. With every swipe of highlighter and every innovation in injectable skincare, there's an echo of those who once shattered eggs, mixed vinegar potions, and trimmed their hairlines with alarming precision, all in the name of the perfect face. We might congratulate ourselves on being more scientifically enlightened, but let's not pretend we're free of the same desperate hope for transformation. If Anne Boleyn had access to Instagram filters, who's to say she wouldn't have indulged? Perhaps her love for pearls would have been replaced by the pursuit of a coveted blue checkmark, and her courtly rivals would have traded whispered intrigues for savage subtweets. Of course, what the Tudor era lacked in safety regulations, it more than made up for in invention. From ceruse, the original full-coverage foundation, laced with enough lead to give even a modern chemistry teacher pause, to the delicate art of veiling smallpox scars with layers of powder, Tudor beauty was all about smoke, mirrors, and an aggressively optimistic approach to personal risk. Did your cheeks sting from vinegar-based blush? And were you worried about early onset hair loss from daily pluckings? Not to worry. There was always a perfumed pomander to dangle off your neck to ward off infection, with all the effectiveness of Scotch tape on a sinking ship. But the true Tudor legacy isn't about the recipes, the rituals, or even the skin that survived. It's in the stubborn optimism, a hopefulness that with just the right concoction, just the right touch of carmine or dusting of alum, you could transform the fate written in your DNA. That desire to rewrite the self is as alive in today's 12-step serums and contouring as it was in the court of Henry VIII. Our TikTok skinfluencers may no longer dabble in mercury or mouse fur, but they're just as eager to promise that you too can wake up flawless. We're all squinting into the future, hoping the next jar or app is the one that finally fixes us. And yet, for all our advances, modern beauty regimes come with their own baggage. Microplastics in our exfoliants, hormonal disruptors in our lotions, eternal quests for impossible smoothness. Every generation has its regrets, and our descendants will likely marvel at our obsession with poreless skin, in much the same way we shudder at portraits of lead-pasted Tudor queens. Maybe one day they'll write cautionary tales about selfie dysmorphia and the mysterious 21st century phenomenon of activewear worn exclusively while lying on the sofa. So, what can we learn from the Tudor obsession with complexion? It's not just a cautionary tale, nor is it a reason to dismiss every past beauty enthusiast as misguided. Rather, it's a reminder that our urge to belong, to enchant, to leave our mark, however temporarily, whether in oils or pixels, is profoundly human. For every hazard, there's also a legacy of creativity, resourceful women who made art from adversity and, in their own way, forged what we now call beauty standards. They remind us that perfection is often both fleeting and a moving target, but the spirit of the quest is its own reward. So tonight, as you drift to sleep in your climate-controlled, lead-free oasis, Take a quiet moment to salute every Tudor woman who risked her complexion and her life just to fit in. Remember their resilience, their hopeful, if hazardously misguided, quest for beauty, and the certainty that history is largely a series of questionable decisions and admirable stubbornness. If you ever wake up worrying about modern beauty trends, just be grateful that your nightly regimen doesn't include scraping lead paste off your nose. Breathe deeply, reflect on the very real comfort of not glowing in the dark, and fall asleep knowing that sometimes surviving history is its own kind of beauty. Sleep well, and may all your skincare be suspiciously non-toxic. So tonight, as you drift asleep in your climate-controlled, lead-free oasis, take a quiet moment to salute every Tudor woman who risked her complexion and her life just to fit in. Remember their resilience, their hopeful, if hazardously misguided, quest for beauty, and the certainty that history is largely a series of questionable decisions and admirable stubbornness. If you ever wake up worrying about modern beauty trends, just be grateful that your nightly regimen doesn't include scraping lead paste off your nose. Breathe deeply, reflect on the very real comfort of not glowing in the dark, and fall asleep, knowing that sometimes surviving history is its own kind of beauty. Sleep well, and may all your skincare be suspiciously non-toxic.